Hi there! My name's Timmy Joe. I usually make videos about computers on the internet, and if you want to subscribe because of that, because you're a camera guy and a computer guy, I'd invite you to. I do some pretty fun stuff around this channel, but today I wanted to talk about my experience with the DJI Osmo Pocket, and it being my, well, not my sole camera, but my go-to camera at CES 2019. Yes, this was my first year going to CES, and as soon as I saw this thing announced, I thought that's the camera I'm going to use for CES. It's perfect, better than lugging an SLR around. So I'm doing a lot of flailing, and I'm doing some, things. And this is the auto setting on here. And just notice what it's doing. We're going to talk about what it's doing right after this intro. Alrighty, yes, much better, right? This is a Sony a5000, so quite an old, AS or APS-C sensor, mirrorless camera, but I used them and they actually produced some pretty decent results. But this thing's miles ahead of it for several reasons, 4K 60 being one of them. It doesn't overheat, as far as I can tell, which is freaking awesome. But why didn't I bring, the Sony a5000 if I'm so much happier with the footage? Well, I mean, look at this thing, and we'll talk about how I've got this rigged up in a second. But it's just I had this in my pocket. I could pull it out. It turns on in an instant, and then I could start recording something if I needed to. It's as convenient as a cell phone camera, and I would say the image quality on it for video especially is almost, if not as good as some of the great camera phones that are out right now, like the Google Pixel or the iPhone. It definitely has the footage, but you can tell this was lifted from a drone because it really is at its best outside. So how did it perform inside of CES? How did it perform in general? Well, let's talk about that. But first, just real quick, the minute I saw this and I saw, Casey Neistat and blah, 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 pick this thing up near launch date, I had to have it. And I was extremely ecstatic about the price point. In fact, I was expecting this before I knew the price to be more like $500. In fact, it's, I think, cheaper than, the latest GoPro. And in my opinion, it does so much more, except for it's not the greatest for, putting on a selfie stick while you're snowboarding, unless you want to, there is supposed to be a waterproof housing and stuff that'll make that a little bit, protect the gimbal and stuff like that. But for vlogging, because the mic is pointed out, it's great. And I'd say that the mic is actually pretty decent.
This has been your Smart Alexa correspondent, Timmy Joe, working at the CES booth.
I mean, it's not bad at all considering, and I think even it's gotten better with some firmware updates, I'm not sure. But then there's a bunch of accessories that allow you to go further than that and plug external audio into this and a bunch of stuff. So we'll talk about that. So I'm going to go over what I really liked about using this at CES, and then some of the foibles, and actually some of the things that just plain got fixed that made me want to keep this thing, because at one point I was considering returning it. So yes, I went to CES, a lot of dimly lit hotel suites, where there's a lot of RGB, of course, being displayed at, because I was there mostly for computer stuff. But it did a really good job at low light, considering. A little bit noisy, but nothing like unusable. And I'll just throw up some footage here of when I first got there and, what I was doing. And I would say there's some downfalls to it, of course, it being so small and it having a gimbal. You might think that it's going to save you every single time, but you need to be very gentle when hand holding this thing to take B-roll footage and stuff like that, for sure. But, ultimately, I think I could have got away with this a little bit better had I just paced myself a bit. It was my first CES, and a lot of that footage, I'm just thinking I have to be as quick as possible because there's someone else waiting in line to check out the stuff I'm checking out. And what I did was I actually brought a little handheld Zoom audio recorder, and I would just, one hand, and I would move around like this, and it did a fairly good job. So, it was really good to just pick up and go. It fits in this thing, it's in your pocket. You can pull it out. It turns on in an instant. You start recording, and you can actually get some pretty good shots. But Some downfalls of this thing right out of the gate is that there was no accessories in the box, or even at launch accessories really at all. that you could attach a tripod, you know, to use this thing. And, you know, you're pretty limited to the functionality with this. And, you know, what would have been great is if they would have included, or at least at launch had, I don't even think DJI has this yet, a case that lets you put your phone or, you know, a holder, like kind of like this. This is actually what I ended up doing. And I did a couple things to Jimmy rig using this at CES. So follow along. I used these dollar store, you know, has a tripod, you know, 3.5-inch jack on the bottom of it, like that. And that would hold the thing together for me. And then it would give me the tripod. So I could put this on this monopod that actually, I'll show you that in a second. And I could film and make sure everything was, you know, well placed, because the USB-C jack on my LG V30 is a piece of junk. And unless I do this, it won't maintain connection, which is a big problem. So, you know, coming up with this or having this, you know, solution for this at launch would have been nice. Now, there are plenty of Amazon things that have popped up since that do essentially this function. But the fact that I had to do that to start using it right away was kind of annoying. Also, the wireless module I would have purchased from the get-go, but it wasn't available on launch, and I didn't think I was going to get it before CES. So I have ordered one, and it hasn't shown up yet. As well as from Amazon, I've ordered a proper bracket for it, and there's a USB-C to you know, microphone in that kind of, like, actually they're pretty cheap ones that come with a little microphone. So I'm going to be able to do external audio on this as well. But as a grab-and-go camera for CES and a vlog style, with the exception of the field of view on it is not the greatest. Like, it's nice that it doesn't have, you know, a fisheye effect on it. But, you know, you have to outreach your arm as far as possible to fit yourself in frame. And I very much found myself being way too close to things and not going slow enough. So I think if you had that little bit bigger field of view, that would have alleviated some of that. And there are ways to get around the fisheye. Just a little bit, you know, wider lens would have been much appreciated. So pretty good. So I also did this thing. So I purposely bought this monopod the day that I pre-ordered this thing so that I could, and I made a bracket. I'll show you that in a second. This fits in my bag. It shrinks down to this big. These little tripod feet on the bottom of it, you know, fold up. So I could quickly pull this out of my bag, unlock this, pull this, you know, down. And then I had made this mount because out of the box, this thing doesn't have a tripod mount. And I got a little, I don't know what this is. It's some sort of clip I found in a junk drawer that actually fits it real nice. And you could just kind of hold it like that. And then I put this, this is like a handlebar mount for a GoPro or just like an Amazon accessory, and a tripod mount, and I linked them together, and there was my, you know, tripod holder, and it worked out pretty good. So you can get kind of creative with how small this is, and it's not very heavy, and figure it out. And of course, there are proper accessories that have been made for it by now, but I had to get pretty creative. But I thought it was lovely that I could just put myself in frame, you know, back out a bit if I wanted to. It wasn't actually heavy enough to tip this thing over with all of the phone stuff on there too, and it worked out. So it was a pretty good experience, except for its cell phone quality. So a lot of these big YouTubers and stuff go to CES and they have massive equipment. You're not going to be competing with them for image quality necessarily in dimly lit hotel rooms and stuff like that, when you have, you know, a narrow depth of field and not a very good, you know, field of view. You know, it's a little bit tight. And there's a little bit of grainy footage because the ISO has to be cranked on this, but ultimately it's passable. It does a very good job at that, and this thing will be 100 times better outside with proper lighting. So before we go here, I just want to give some downfalls of this thing, and actually some that were corrected. Number one, it disconnects from my phone quite often. So some way of securing this out of the box would have been much better, because the functionality of the touchscreen is very limited, and I don't wind up using any of the manual options, as well as the wireless module should be in this thing. I mean, I get that you wanted to make it inexpensive. It has a wonderful lasting battery. It's pretty decent. It will even record and charge at the same time. So I brought a little USB or a power pack, and I plugged in the USB-C, you know, in between things, and I never had an issue with battery. It'll probably record for about 45 minutes straight before it starts yelling at you for low battery. But the key thing is it's so easy to turn on and off that there's no reason to like leave it on, because, you know, in between takes you can turn it off, put it in your pocket, or put it on, you know, down on a desk, and then grab it, you know, and turn it off again. And, you know, you're going to save some battery that way. And then if you really need to, a cell phone, you know, power pack will power this thing. But I think it's mostly battery in here, and it doesn't overheat. Never had an overheating issue. All my Sony cameras overheat, so that's a bonus. But a big gripe I had with this, it almost made me return it, was it focus hunted when I would set it up as a stationary camera with indoor lighting like this, especially if that's why in the beginning I was flailing my arms a lot. And it seems to have fixed itself with a firmware update that I actually got maybe on like January 8th, I think, while I was at CES. It was like almost a deal breaker. I was considering using a Sony Pocket Cam that I have to film some of the footage for this, because I noticed it was going, you know, and the Sony cameras are pretty good for focus and weren't doing that. And it was almost a deal breaker. And I was thinking, when I return from CES, I just got this thing, you know, in December, I'll be within a month, I'll send it back. But the firmware update seems to have fixed it, the majority of that issue. It was bad for when you were vlog style, you know, it was just like, you know, because of the narrow field of view on it, you could notice that all the time, and that was really throwing me off, but it seems to have been fixed. The auto on this does have some issues, though. It still does focus hunt a little bit, and I noticed that the color temperature changes like just wildly, depending on, you know, just shadows and lighting in the same lit room. And you can tell that in the intro. I look yellow, and then I look red, and then I look white, and then I look yellow again. It's bad for changing color temperature like way too dramatically. And it's nice that it does that, because it's you know, dynamically updating to the lighting and conditions, but it should do it gradually. It should know, like, you know, wait. It'd say, oh wow, for 10 seconds the color, or you know, or 5 seconds the color has been wrong. I should change it now, and do it like over a period of 5 seconds, not just over a period of a second. So that's something DJI could definitely fix up on. But ultimately, can you go wrong for a $350 mini camera with a gimbal on it that shoots 4K 60, that has a decent battery life, that vlogs well, and the microphone isn't terrible? Not at all. This thing is a pretty cool product, and what I'm looking forward to is the update to this. When this, you know, this second iteration comes out, because I think they'll iron out. I'd love to pay $100 more to have wireless built in, to have a tripod jack built in, and maybe to have an accessory in the box, something simple that will let you link it to the cell phone easily, or maybe just a little bit bigger screen. But make this have, you know, be the size between this and the big Osmo, the big daddy, you know, that's, you know, 3, 4 times, 5 times as big as this. Make one that's just, you know, double the size, that includes all the extra features, and no one would scoff at paying an extra $100 for it, because this thing's cheaper than a GoPro. And it, in my opinion, is way better. Except for if you're, you know, on a boat or on a bike or whatever, you might not want to have this. I know they're building, or there is like a housing for it that's coming out. You know, there are definitely some things where GoPros are just make more sense, because they're a little bit more rugged and don't have a moving motor on top of them. But most people buy GoPros and end up just talking to them into them anyways. This is 10 times better than that, and it's cheaper, so it's just a no-brainer. So if you have any questions, you know, for use of this, if you're thinking of using it for an event, or, you know, even in a studio, let me know. You see that the intro of this, well shot on this, doesn't look anywhere near as good as this does, and I'm shooting this on a $300, you know, 4 or 5 year old mirrorless camera at 1080p. It's just, you know, having the depth of field and the big sensor is there's no trade-off for that. You can't, you know, maybe in 10 years they'll be able to put APS-C sized sensor, you know, quality in a package this small, but you're still dealing with basically essentially a cell phone sensor. But as far as this goes, it is 100% worth it for what it is, and I give it a super thumbs up. So yeah, I'm at Watch Timmy Joe, Instagram and Twitter. If you have any questions about the things I blabbed about in this video, or if maybe you're coming because you're thinking of an Osmo but you're a computer guy, I do lots of fun computer stuff, so subscribe and all that YouTube garbage that people always say at the end of videos. But thanks very much for listening to me blather. I will definitely be keeping this thing, because it'll just come in handy, and I'm thinking I'm just going to get rid of the few GoPros and stuff I have kicking around, throw them on Craigslist, Kijiji, because this thing just takes over for it, and I think I've got 5 action cameras. I'll just keep one of them for that, one time a year I gotta put something in water or whatever, or I'll just buy the housing for this thing. It'll work. I'll see you guys in another video. Thank you very much for watching. DJI Osmo Pocket, super good, works for conventions and stuff like that, but don't expect it to go beyond the limits of a cell phone quality of video. Or GoPro quality of video, because even this little gimbal can't save the small sensor size. I'll see you guys later.
Timmy Joe, he makes videos about computers on the internet. You betcha.